So all around the Nilgiri Hills, which is this region of Tamil Nadu that I'm in, you'll see these kind of, rolling hills that have been converted into kind of terrace tea farms. And you can see these crops kind of running down around. They're here as well. And you can see they're kind of built in a terrace way where, adapting to the fact that, hey, these are some pretty damn steep hills. You have it sort of on increments, so they've raised the land up and then they've brought it down in certain areas, so you have almost steps. And it's the same all the way across there and throughout most of the cultivated land around the major towns and in between the major towns in this sort of eco zone. Kind of tempting to think, oh man, this must be a kind of, ancient mode of cultivation. This must have been here for centuries. This is like a long-standing practice. But, and that's kind of what I thought initially, but actually it's not at all. This is kind of a little bit of a depressing landscape. Because as you can see, if you look higher up and kind of in between some of these, there are trees. And actually, tea cultivation in this area is only about 100, 150 years old, maybe, if that. It was brought by the British, because traditionally, these hills are the home of a group of indigenous, or Adivasi is the Sanskrit term, peoples. And, their exact composition is kind of contentious. There's a group called the Toda, who seem to be the oldest, but then there's also peoples called the Badagas, the Irilas, the Kuramburas, who have varying claims to Adivasi and indigenous status as well, though there's some contention within them about that. I met an old Toda man who told me that the Todas are the only indigenous peoples, and the Badagas came from Andhra Pradesh hundreds of years later. So I don't really know I can't really evaluate the status of those claims, but regardless, all of those peoples were not tea cultivators. They were kind of hunter-gatherers, pastoralists, horticulturalists. The Todas traditionally raise buffalo. But those Adivasi peoples are not actually the majority here anymore, because when the British came and they had ruled the lowland areas for quite some time, and they found these hills which have a very temperate, rainy climate, a lot like Britain, and they thought, wow, this is a wonderful place. I want to spend part of the year here, especially when it's hot down the rice-growing plains below. They would come up here for the summer, where it's a lot cooler. And the British brought with them tea cultivation. So they, basically, to varying extents, bought and just sort of stole and coerced the land out of the indigenous Adivasi peoples, and cut down a lot of the trees that were here for tea plant cultivation. And following the British, they brought following them were large populations of Tamils, who are the majority people in the state of Tamil Nadu, who came up from the lowlands with the British to cultivate these areas and to sort of work under them, because of course the British couldn't possibly do anything themselves. And so in some ways this is a really beautiful landscape, but in others it's a bit of an ecological dead zone, because the Nilgiris are a biosphere reserve now. But they're recognized as one of the most biodiverse areas of the world. But if you look at that hill, it's pretty much just tea and coffee. And I believe even a lot of the trees are not native species of trees. So it's beautiful, but a little depressing. And I guess it's partially my fault.